Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished leaders and friends, it is an honor and a privilege to return to Kiev, my third visit to your beautiful country, and a privilege to be asked to speak to you today. Each time I return, I feel something that is difficult to describe, but it is impossible to ignore. It is a sense of clarity. Clarity about what matters, clarity about what is at stake, and clarity about who is carrying that burden. So let me begin differently today, not by speaking about Ukraine, but by speaking to you. To those defending this country, to those holding families, communities, and institutions together under extraordinary strain. The world sees you, and the world respects you. I am not here as a politician. I am here as a soldier who understands service, as a humanitarian who has seen the human cost of conflict, and as a friend of Ukraine who believes the world must not grow used to this war or numb to its consequences. Because what is happening here is not simply a war about territory. It is a war about values, about sovereignty, about whether the principles that underpin our shared democracy shall hold meaning. The theme of this forum, as we've heard, asks, darkness or dawn? Is light ahead? And standing here in a country that has endured so much, it would be easy to feel the weight of darkness. But Ukraine has already begun to answer that question, not in speeches, but in action. For more than a decade, since 2014, Ukraine has stood on the front line of a struggle that extends far beyond its borders. And since the full-scale invasion, the Ukrainian people have done something extraordinary. You have adapted, you have endured, and you have held the line. Few believed that would be possible, and yet here you are, still standing, still fighting, and still leading. Because this is what leadership looks like in the modern world. Not just strength in arms, but strength in unity. Not just resilience, but innovation under fire.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for being here again today and for continuing to engage with these important conversations in a thoughtful and respectful way. If you are new here, don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video so we can keep building a space where global events are not just reported but understood, where we go beyond headlines and look at meaning, context and consequence. Today's story is not just about a speech. It is not just about Prince Harry. And it is not just about Ukraine. It is about how history repeats itself through human voices. It is about how humanitarian language enters political spaces. And it is about how one man's words at a war forum can echo the legacy of his mother while addressing some of the most powerful leaders in the world. Prince Harry has made headlines after speaking at the Kyiv Security Forum in Ukraine, where he delivered a message that was deeply personal, highly symbolic, and unmistakably political in impact, even though he insisted he was not speaking as a politician. And that tension is where this entire story begins. Prince Harry opened his speech with a statement that immediately set the tone. This statement is carefully constructed. It is not accidental, it is not neutral, and it is not new in its emotional DNA. Because when we hear those words, many people immediately think of his mother, Princess Diana. In 1997, Diana stood in Angola, walking through a cleared minefield, wearing protective gear, drawing global attention to landmines and civilian suffering. She said she was not there as a politician, but as a humanitarian. And that moment changed global perception. It helped shift international policy debates. It brought emotional clarity to a subject that had been buried under technical language and political distance. Now, decades later, her son echoes that same framing. But the world he speaks into is different, more connected, more polarized, more fatigued by constant conflict coverage, and arguably more numb. So when Harry says he is not a politician, he is doing something very specific. He is trying to remove institutional distance between himself and the human reality of war. He is saying, I am not here to negotiate power. I am here to bear witness. And that distinction matters, because in modern conflict communication, credibility is often tied to position. But humanitarian credibility is tied to presence. To understand the weight of Harry's words, we must understand the environment he was speaking in. Ukraine is not just a geopolitical issue. It is a living humanitarian crisis. Cities have been destroyed, families displaced, lives lost daily, and the emotional reality of the war has shifted over time, from shock to attention, and now, for many global audiences, toward fatigue. This is what Harry directly addresses when he says, that single sentence is one of the most important emotional warnings in the speech, because numbness is not indifference born from cruelty. It is often indifference born from overload. Human beings cannot emotionally process endless suffering at full intensity, so the mind protects itself by reducing emotional response. But in doing so, awareness fades, and when awareness fades, urgency disappears. And when urgency disappears, political action weakens. Harry is trying to interrupt that cycle. He is not offering military solutions. He is not offering diplomatic frameworks. He is trying to keep emotional consciousness alive. After establishing his identity and humanitarian framing, Prince Harry moves into one of the most direct parts of his speech. He addresses Russian leadership, specifically President Vladimir Putin. This is a carefully measured statement. It avoids insult, it avoids escalation, but it is firm in moral positioning. He continues, this is significant for several reasons. First, it frames time as critical. A moment now, not later, not eventually, now. Second, it emphasizes mutual human cost. He does not frame suffering as one-sided propaganda language. He acknowledges suffering on both sides of the conflict. And third, he introduces the idea of choice. In long wars, narratives often shift toward inevitability. Harry challenges that. He reintroduces agency. Even in war, he suggests, there is still space for decision. And that is a fundamentally humanitarian argument, not a strategic one. Prince Harry does something interesting in the next part of his speech. He does not mention Donald Trump directly, but he clearly refers to American leadership. And that choice is deliberate, because it shifts the message from personality to institution. He emphasizes that the United States has a singular role in the Ukraine conflict. Why? Because of historical commitments. When Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it did so under assurances regarding sovereignty and territorial integrity. Those assurances created expectations of protection and stability. Harry's argument is that those expectations still matter, and he says this statement is very important in international relations terms, because it reframes responsibility not as generosity, but as obligation, not as optional involvement, but as structural trust. He is essentially saying global stability depends on credibility, and credibility depends on consistency. If international promises are ignored or weakened, the entire global system becomes less stable. So this is not just a moral appeal, it is a strategic one. One of the most striking elements of the speech is how Harry defines himself. He uses three identities: soldier, humanitarian, witness to conflict. Each identity serves a different purpose. As a soldier, he understands discipline, structure, and the realities of armed conflict. As a humanitarian, he understands suffering and vulnerability. And as a witness, he becomes a communicator of reality to those who are far removed from it. This combination is powerful because it bridges three worlds: military experience, humanitarian advocacy, public communication. Very few public figures occupy all three spaces, and this is why his voice carries emotional weight, even when he is not speaking as an elected leader. It is impossible to discuss this speech without returning to Princess Diana, because her influence is not just symbolic, it is structural in how humanitarian storytelling is understood today. When Diana stood in Angola in 1997, she transformed a technical issue, landmines, into a human story. She did not speak in policy language, she spoke in emotional truth, and that emotional truth changed global awareness. Prince Harry is operating in that same tradition, but the context has evolved. Today's conflicts are global, fast-moving and constantly mediated through digital platforms. Attention is fragmented, so emotional clarity becomes even more important. Harry is not just repeating his mother's legacy. He is adapting it to a new information age. One of the most psychologically important themes in Harry's speech is emotional fatigue. Modern audiences are exposed to constant war updates, social media footage, political arguments, conflicting narratives. This creates a paradox. People are more informed than ever, but also more emotionally detached. Harry's warning about numbness is therefore not abstract. It is diagnostic. He is identifying a global psychological condition, and he is urging resistance to it. Because if people stop feeling, they stop caring. And if they stop caring, accountability weakens. It is easy to reduce this moment to celebrity commentary, but that would miss the deeper function of the speech. Because speeches like this do three things. 1, they keep attention on ongoing crises. 2, they introduce moral language into political spaces. 3, they remind global audiences of human cost. Prince Harry is not negotiating peace. He is not commanding armies. He is not drafting treaties. But he is influencing narrative space. And in modern conflicts, narrative space matters, because public attention shapes political pressure, and political pressure shapes decision-making. Perhaps the most important takeaway is this. Prince Harry is not attempting to hold political power. He is attempting to hold moral position. That is a different form of influence. It is not about authority. It is about visibility. It is about reminding the world that war is not just strategy. It is human life, and that suffering does not become less real just because it becomes familiar. Prince Harry's speech at the Kyiv Security Forum sits at the intersection of history, identity and global crisis. It echoes Princess Diana. It speaks into modern warfare. It challenges global leadership, and it warns against emotional detachment. Whether one agrees with every part of his framing or not, the underlying message is consistent. Human suffering must remain visible. Attention must not fade. And responsibility, political or moral, cannot be ignored simply because a conflict becomes long. He closes with a simple but powerful idea, that he is there not as a politician, but as someone who has seen what war does to people. And in that sense, his role is not to resolve the conflict, but to ensure the world does not stop seeing it. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure to like, subscribe and share. And as always, stay informed, stay thoughtful and stay engaged.